Hello, everyone. Welcome to this We Did It Health event. At We Did It Health, we're working to create a healthy, happy, vegan, and plant based world. We're doing that through building community and offering resources such as today's discussion to help you create relationships where you plant seeds of hopeful curiosity in others when they ask about a vegan or plant based lifestyle. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We also invite you to join our Facebook communities and check out our website so you can connect with others and find support and encouragement with like-minded people. My name is Mariquita Solis, and I'm so excited to welcome Stuart Waldner to tonight's show. Stuart didn't start out to be an activist. After 2 decades of exploring the Earth's greatest wonders and connecting with sacred sites around the globe, he transitioned to a plant-based diet in 2008. The better he felt and the more he learned about the statistical connections between our dietary choices and the worldwide crises we're about to face, the more he felt called to wake people up for our health and for the planet. When Stuart's not working, he's playing with his dogs, and he enjoys cooking and eating plant-based foods, running and restoring windows in his 128-year-old Victorian home. So, welcome everyone. Please give StreamYard permission to use your name. If you're watching, let us know where you're watching from and get your questions ready for Stuart. Welcome, Stuart, to our show.
Thank you, Mariquita. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for inviting me to be on your show.
Well, I was very lucky to meet you at Atlanta Veg Fest, and I thought, wow, this guy's got to be on We Did It Health.
Well, I'm glad we met too. That was wonderful, and so it led to tonight, and that's great. So I'm going to be talking about escape the Meatrix and embrace a plant-based lifestyle for a greener planet. And mainstream media talks a lot that we need to move away from burning fossil fuels like natural gas, coal, and oil, and move toward green energy solutions like solar and wind. And that we all need to start driving electric cars, right? So we hear this over and over and over again. But what the mainstream media doesn't talk about is that climate scientists say that we're not going to meet our climate goals without also decarbonizing the global food production system, that we are doomed to fail unless we tackle the emissions around food. So today, my talk is going to be about sustainable foods, what that looks like, and how can we get there. And I believe that if we're not a part of the solution, we're part of the problem. And so I'm hoping that everyone will leave today's presentation feeling fired up to be a part of the solution and ready to make changes to help bring this about, because like I said, mainstream media isn't talking about it, but we're at a critical time on our planet right now, from climate change to emerging infectious diseases, biodiversity loss, mass extinction rates, environmental degradation, our declining health, to the horrible return on investment of animal agriculture. The signs are all around us, and I see you shaking your head. That can be a depressing list, and you can get really down when you hear all of that. But Mariquita, the most amazing thing that I learned when I was researching my book is that all of those things and more are connected to the food on our plates and choices that we're making in the grocery aisle. I had no idea. So I'm very passionate about sharing this information with people. And so I really appreciate you giving me that opportunity. But speaking about climate change, kind of going back to that, what are our climate goals? So climate scientists say that we want to prevent heating the Earth no more than 2 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial temperatures by the end of this century. And then we have this aspirational goal of trying to limit it to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And that way we would avert experiencing some of the worst case scenarios of climate change. So that's our aspirational goal, is no more than 1.5 degrees. Unfortunately, we are right now sitting at 1.1 degrees Celsius. So we're over 2/3 of the way to 1.5. And then something really interesting happened this year. You may have heard about it, Mariquita, about El Nino. Have you heard about the El Nino effect?
I haven't heard. I've heard a tiny bit, but not enough.
Yeah.
So go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah. Well, it's this is something that happens in the surface temperatures of the tropical Pacific Ocean fluctuate, and they oscillate from getting warmer and cooler. And when this happens, it just doesn't impact the surface temperatures of the water in the Pacific. It affects weather all over the planet. And so for me, I love it because this is a potent reminder of the interconnectivity of everything on the planet. So when this is happening in the Pacific, it's affecting everything. We are all connected to each other. And so right now we are in El Nino. So the surface temperatures, like I said, of the tropical Pacific Ocean are warmer. And what this means is that scientists say that for the first time ever, we got a sneak preview this summer of what living at a 1.5 degrees Celsius world would look like. And I think that's a pretty scary thing. Just think about some of the things we experienced this summer. Okay, so like there was this huge heat dome over the American Southwest, like all summer. Phoenix, Arizona broke a record for 31 days, consecutive days of exceeding 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Um, the coastal water temperature in Florida reached 101 degrees. Scientists were taking coral out of the water to try to save it. The water was getting so hot. And then we saw these huge wildfires in Canada, and it created such air pollution all over the northeastern part of the United States, and even as far down as Kentucky, where I live, we had air quality warnings for several days. And I was wearing a mask on my walks to try to protect my lungs. Um, and then, like last month, there was the first tropical storm to hit California in 84 years. Most tropical storms never make landfall in California, but this one did. They got a year's worth of rain in one day. So these are some of the things that we've been seeing just locally. And then, of course, just last week, the horrible, devastating floods in Libya, which were created because the dams broke, a horrible loss of life. But it was because they had 16 inches of rain in 24 hours. I mean, that was crazy. A few years ago, we kept hearing things like a 100-year storm. You remember hearing they would say this is a once in 100-year storm. Have you noticed that media doesn't say that anymore? I mean, these storms are becoming so frequent. And that's because of climate change. And this summer is because climate change and El Nino has shown us what living at 1.5 degrees Celsius could look like. And, fortunately, El Nino is going to recede soon, and we're going to get a little bit of a break. But, it's all hands on deck time. I mean, we need to pull out all the stops and do everything that we can to reduce our emissions. And so that's why I think it's so important that, we empower ourselves and make the choices that we can to bring our own personal carbon emissions down. And we can do that very effectively with food. So I talked about our climate goals and El Nino. You may have heard earlier this year, Mariquita, that some memos were leaked to the news media. These were internal memos from the fossil fuel industry. And I don't know if you remember hearing about this, but these memos said that the fossil fuel industry knew as early as the 1970s what their products were doing and what they were going to do to the planet, right? So they knew about climate change as early as the 1970s. And so what did they do? They did a hard pivot into renewable energy, right? And they developed solar and wind. No, they didn't. They didn't do any of that. They suppressed the information. They buried it. And they led a misinformation campaign to try to convince Americans that climate change was a hoax. And they did a really good job of that, right? I mean, there are a lot of people who, even still today, don't think that climate change is real or that it has anything to do with what humans are doing. So the fossil fuel industry has led a really great disinformation campaign. The shocking thing for me to learn when I was researching my book is that the meat and dairy industries do the exact same thing. So the information I'm going to share with everyone tonight is information that the meat and dairy industries don't want Americans to know. and they try to keep hidden from us so that we will continue to buy their products. And how do I know that they don't want us to know this? Well, between the year 2000 and 2019, the meat industry in the United States spent $200 million lobbying Congress against climate change legislation. Why would the meat industry care about climate change? You would think, oh, the fossil fuel industry would be spending that kind of money. But no, it was the meat industry. We'll get to it in a minute why they would be doing that. Relative to each company's revenue, Tyson Chicken spends 33% more on political campaigns than ExxonMobil. I mean, that blew my mind. Why is the meat industry so involved in our politics? It's because they want politicians to do their bidding. And that exactly happened in 2015. So every 5 years, our government publishes a new set of dietary guidelines. And they're supposed to be based on the latest nutritional science, but my book talks about why, that doesn't happen. But for the first time in 2015, the dietary guidelines said that a plant-based lifestyle was healthier, more sustainable, and was better at fighting climate change than the standard American diet. So what happened? The meat industry had a fit, and they lobbied Congress hard. And a year later, that verbiage was stripped from the guidelines because the meat industry didn't want Americans to connect the food on their plate with the environment and with climate change. So the meat and dairy industries, they're very protective of their products, and they don't want us to make these connections. They want to keep us in the dark, just like the fossil fuel industry tried to keep us in the dark on climate change. So I'm going to show you things that the meat and dairy industry wish I wouldn't, but let's do it.
Okay.
But first, I want to say, no, this is good. So this is what we're talking about tonight. But before we get into that, I want to first talk about two myths that are very prevalent in the green sustainability movement within food. There are a lot of things that are out there in the plant-based movement, and also within just all of food that we hear about. And the first one I want to talk about are plastic bags. Okay, I'm going to show my age right now because I remember when I went to the grocery growing up, you only had brown paper bags. That's the only bag that you could get. And then what happened? They started introducing these plastic bags. And so when you went through the checkout line, the person bagging the groceries would ask you, would you like paper or plastic? Well, I took a stand for the earth, and I was going to do something green and good. And I said, I'm not going to ever use single-use plastics, and I'm going to stick with my brown paper bag, come hell or high water, is what my mom would say. So then what happened? The grocery stores phased out paper bags, and you only had plastic bags. And so what did I do? Well, I went out and bought me a cotton tote bag that I could carry back and forth to the grocery. And I went into the store proudly displaying my cotton cloth bag, virtue signaling, like, look at me, I'm doing this great thing for the earth, and you can do it too, and we can stick it to the man. We don't have to use these plastic bags at all. So guess what? A Dutch study came out in 2019, and it supports some previous studies, and it said that the most benign bag you can use for your groceries are, drum roll please, these plastic bags. Oh my God, I had it wrong the whole time. I thought I was doing something good and green for the earth, but it's a myth that when we use something other than these plastic bags, we're doing something good for the planet. So this says, when taking into account the impact of manufacturing on climate change, ozone depletion, water use, air pollution, human toxicity, these bags are the most benign of the current common options. So guess how many times I would have to use my brown paper bag for it to have the same environmental impact as using one of these plastic bags twice, once to bring my groceries home and another time to line a trash can. Do you have any idea, Mariquita, how many times I would need to use my brown paper bag?
No, I don't. I have no idea. You're blowing my mind.
Yeah, I would have to use that brown paper bag 43 times. Now, I don't know about you. I could never use a brown paper bag 43 times. Your mileage may vary, but inevitably after the third, fourth, fifth time, the handle's breaking off, the seams are ripping. I mean, I could just never get that kind of mileage out of a brown paper bag. So guess what? Guess how many times I would have to use my cotton tote bag for it to have the same environmental impact as using these plastic bags twice? If it was 43 for a paper bag, do you have any idea?
I don't know. How about 150?
150? No. I would have to use that cotton tote bag 7,100 times.
Oh my God.
Mind blown. That means I'd have to use it once a day, every day for 19 years for it to have the same environmental impact as using one of these plastic bags twice. And if I bought an organic cotton tote bag, and organic cotton has a lower yield than conventional cotton. So if I had an organic cotton tote bag, I would have to use that bag 20,000 times. So that blew my mind when I learned that. And I was like, I had it backwards the whole time. Everybody wants to do the right thing. And I was thinking I was doing something good and green for the earth, right? But, we want to make sure that our actions are having the desired impacts. And, the thing is, whatever bag you're using now, use it until it falls apart. Don't switch bags now. Just keep using what you got until it can't hold anything more. And we're going to find out in this presentation that it's not the bag that's the important thing, it's what goes in the bag. Okay, so that's the most important thing. And then the other myth is about buying local food. So this summer, I gave a presentation at a sustainability festival in my hometown, Lexington, Kentucky. And we have a vegan food truck here in Lexington. So since it was a sustainability festival, I thought surely they're going to have the vegan food truck there, but they didn't. They hired a food truck to come that was proudly advertising that they were using all local ingredients. So it was full of animal-based foods, but it was all sourced locally. So they had meat, chicken, fish, cheese, eggs, everything, but it was locally sourced. So this is the presenters of this sustainability festival fell victim to this myth that just because it's local means it's green, but it doesn't. Let's look at this next slide here. So this shows the greenhouse gas emissions across the supply chain. And so what we're looking at is that red section of the top where it says transport. It's in the color red. So the food that's at the top of the list is beef herd, and you can see how many emissions they have. And there's just a tiny sliver of their emissions is transportation. In fact, only 0.5% of beef's greenhouse gas emissions comes from transportation. The rest of it is not related to transportation at all. And then if you look at the very bottom of that list, you see bananas. Bananas has the lowest footprint of all these foods here. But look at the box to the right at the bottom. Bananas, 32.4% of their emissions comes from transportation, and it's still at the bottom of the list. So the science I share in my book says it's better for us to import plant-based foods from the other side of the planet, like bananas, than it is to source beef from our next door neighbor, because it's not where the food is grown in proximity to where you live. It's the food that makes the difference. So the transportation is just a small fraction. So it's a myth to think that when we buy local food, we're actually doing something green for the earth, because we might not necessarily be doing that if we're buying locally sourced animal-based foods. And I'm all for supporting my community and keeping my money in the local economy. I'm all for doing that. But it's a myth to think that when we do that with food, it's automatically doing something good for the earth. So I'll get off my soapbox now. Those are my two myth busters. So I'm going to share a lot of charts tonight and a lot of information. And all these charts are in my book, and I love them because they are potent visual representations of the science. And it's really clear to see by these charts that plant-based foods are far superior to animal-based foods in every environmental category. So I'm going to show this next chart. Oh, first of all, before we get into that. So what are sustainable foods? So let's just, go down the list here. So sustainable foods, they require less land to grow. They use less water to grow. They emit fewer greenhouse gas emissions. They contribute less to biodiversity loss and mass extinction rates. they have greater resilience, they are eaten, not wasted, and more. So the resilience part is really important because as our earth heats up, we're having greater droughts and a lot temperatures are getting really, really hot. So we need to find crops that are resilient and can withstand the heat and climate change, that can thrive in that kind of environment. And then sustainable food is food that we eat and don't throw away. I was stunned to learn that according to the USDA, 30 to 40% of all food in the United States goes into a landfill. I mean, that is insane. We can't just keep throwing away that kind of food. I mean, it's not sustainable, and it's a horrible return on the investment of all the resources that go into growing that food. So we need to actually do better at buying the food and eating the food that we buy or that we grow and not wasting it. So, and now I was kind of got ahead of myself. So now this next chart is about looking at different foods and their environmental impacts. So this one chart right here, I'm going to try to go full screen here and hopefully, okay, cool, we did it. So there's 5 columns here. You can see greenhouse gases, land use, energy use, acidification potential, and eutrophication potential. And then, plant-based foods are green, dairy and eggs are yellow, fish is blue, and meat is red. And you can just take a quick glance at this chart and you can see that plant-based foods are killing it. I mean, they are so much better for the environment. They emit fewer greenhouse gases. They require a lot less land. They require less energy, the acidification potential and eutrophication potential. I mean, they are far superior in every category to animal-based foods. And, I could just probably do a mic drop right here and say goodnight because that's like, that just shows, my point is like, so for sustainable foods, we want to embrace plant-based foods because they're so much better. They're so much better for the environment and for the earth. And this chart is in my book, but it's not in color, unfortunately, because my book's not in color. And then this chart is also in my book. So generally speaking, plant-based foods generate fewer greenhouse gas emissions than animal-based foods, which we just saw on the previous chart. And the same is true for protein-rich plant-based foods. So I wanted to put this in my presentation because, as you know, Mariquita, when you tell someone you're plant-based or you're thinking about doing it, people are like, oh my God, you're going to be protein deprived. Where are you going to get your protein? So we all hear that. And so this chart is just focused on protein-rich foods. Excuse me. And so it is also comparing short-lived and long-lived greenhouse gases. So the long-lived greenhouse gases are the bluish-gray gases. And then the short-lived in this graph are the purple, and that's methane. And we'll talk about methane in a minute. So, but even without methane, if you look at the 4 foods at the bottom, tofu, beans, peas, and nuts, those are high-protein plant-based foods. And they really don't have any methane emissions, so we don't have to really worry about that. But even if we discounted methane from them, their footprint, the footprint of many plant-based foods can be more than 10 times less than animal-based foods. So that's how much better they are in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And everything above those 4 there are all animal-based foods, and you can see how much more the bar is there. So there's so many more emissions there. And then when you add the short-lived greenhouse gas of methane, it's really off the chart. And so we want to talk about methane. So methane is a short-lived greenhouse gas, and when I say short-lived, most of it is gone in the atmosphere after about 12 years. But some of it still remains in the atmosphere, and it is so potent. So in its first 20 years, methane is 80 times more efficient at trapping heat into our atmosphere than carbon dioxide. carbon dioxide is what we get when we burn fossil fuels, right? So that's what we're trying to move away from. But methane is 80 times worse than carbon dioxide in the first 20 years. And then this chart shows that, they're looking at the global warming potential over a 100-year period, because long-lived gases stay in the atmosphere for centuries, like carbon dioxide. So even though most of the methane is gone in the first 12 years, over a 100-year period, I just read today, methane is 28 times more efficient at trapping heat into the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. So it's 28 times worse. The global warming potential over a 100-year period of methane is 28 times more than carbon dioxide. So that's why I say, well, where does methane come from in animal-based foods? It's because ruminant meat. So ruminant animals have a multi-chambered stomach, and when they digest their food, they do it through a process called enteric fermentation, and that produces methane, and they belch methane. And so, according to the EPA, the single largest source of methane in the United States comes from animal agriculture, from enteric fermentation, and from manure. So, that's why I say ruminant meat, cows, sheep, lamb, and goats, that's the low-hanging fruit. If you make one change in your diet, getting rid of ruminant meat, it makes a huge difference for the environment. It reduces emissions so much. Excuse me. And we had the 1-year anniversary just a few weeks ago of the Inflation Reduction Act, which was enacted by Congress last summer, and it was the first piece of legislation aimed at curbing the United States greenhouse gas emissions. And historically speaking, the United States has been the single largest emitter of greenhouse gases. So it's been a long time coming, but we finally did it. We finally passed some legislation to try to curb emissions, and I'm all for it. I think it's great, but it's just the beginning, and we need to do more. I downloaded the Inflation Reduction Act and looked at the climate component of it, and it does talk about methane, but it ignores methane from animals. It doesn't even talk about meat or dairy or anything about methane from animals and animal agriculture. And why is it that, according to the EPA, it's the largest source of methane in the country, but we're ignoring it? It's because the meat industry has politicians in their pocket, because they've contributed to their political campaigns to get them elected, and then they lobby them hard to make sure that they don't pass any legislation that would curtail their activity. So it's like I was saying in the beginning, they've taken a play right out of the fossil fuel industry's playbook. So, yeah. And here's two other charts that are in my book. So the first one on the left is land use per 1,000 kilocalories of food. And the first 9, I think, are animal-based foods. So you have beef, lamb, mutton, cheese, beef dairy, milk, pig meat, poultry, farm fish, and eggs. So all those are animal-based foods. Those are at the top. They use more land than all the foods down at the bottom, which are plant-based foods. So it takes 100 times more land to produce a single gram of protein from beef or lamb than from tofu. 100 times more land. That is crazy. And I didn't say earlier, when I talked about the importance of agriculture, I was shocked to find out that half of the earth, half of the land mass on this planet is dedicated to agriculture. 50% of the land on earth we are now dedicating to agriculture. And 75% of the global farmland is used by animal-based foods, but it's only producing 18% of our calories. I'll say that again, 75% of the global farmland we're using for animal-based foods, and we're only getting 18% of our calories out of that. That is a horrible return on investment. We can't continue to do that. We need, we don't have more land to convert to agriculture. We just can't do it. We're already outside the safe operating space in many areas on our planet. In agriculture, we've exceeded we can't expand no more. We can't do more deforestation to grow more crops. So we have to get more efficient, and we have to prioritize, what kind of crops we're going to grow. And I advocate for us moving away from animal-based foods and growing crops for human consumption instead of animal consumption. And that would save so many resources. And then the water requirement per ton of food is the graph on the right. And, beef, again, is the top one. And in all these charts, beef is going to be at the top of the chart. It takes so many resources to create, a $4 burger. It's really insane. And, how is it that we can have a $4 burger when we have all these environmental inputs? It's because our government subsidizes meat tremendously. I think it was in 2021, the government gave the beef industry $9 billion in handouts, in direct and indirect payments, $9 billion. That's why we can have a $4 burger at Burger King. If we were really paying the costs up front, hamburgers and all meat would be really, really expensive because it's a luxury item. But we don't think it's luxury items anymore because the government's subsidizing all of this. So unfortunately, the second one on the list in the water requirement is nuts. And, there's been some pushback about almond milk as a substitute for cow's milk. And people have been saying, those almond trees are so thirsty, y'all, you shouldn't be doing that. But, almond trees do require a lot of water, but they also sequester a lot of carbon out of the atmosphere. So they are actually helping us with the decarbonization of the planet. And to create almond milk, you use a third of the water that you do to create cow's milk. So it's still better. And there are other, we're not limited to almond milk for our plant-based milk. There's other milks that we can use. So to say, all those almond trees are so thirsty, y'all just drink cow's milk. Well, no, okay, you don't have to drink almond milk. I think the nut milk or the plant-based milk that's the best, I think, for the environment overall is soy milk still. And Marikita, you may have heard of this in the news too. So due to climate change, the Colorado River is really at risk of drying up, and because we've had such severe droughts out west. And that's a real problem because states like Arizona, California, and Nevada use that water out of the Colorado River. And so earlier this year, those three states came together and they came to an agreement on how they were going to allocate that water, considering climate change and how things had changed. So that was a great historic agreement that they were able to do that. But the shocking thing that I learned was only out of all the water that we take out of the Colorado River, only 12% of it is used by residents for residential use. 55% of the water that we take out of the Colorado River, we use to grow alfalfa, hay, grasses, corn silage for livestock. 55% growing all these crops for animals and food that we don't need and will be better off without. So it's crazy to look at all this, all the resources that go into creating animal-based foods. In fact, it's so huge that Stephen Chu, who was in 2019, he was a president of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. He was the 12th Energy Secretary of the United States and a Nobel Prize recipient. And he said, if cattle and dairy cows were a country, they would have more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire EU 28. And he said that before Brexit. So now it's the EU 27 and the UK. But that's a mind-boggling statement. You think about it. I mean, if we could do something that could remove all the emissions from the EU and the UK, I mean, we would want to do that, right? But most people think, yeah, I mean, we would want to do that, or we at least want to consider it. But, you know, we think because we were born into the Meatrix, we think that we need all these cattle and dairy cows, right? Because, you know, where would we get our protein and where would we get our calcium? Because we've been, you know, brainwashed into thinking that these are the only ways of getting those nutrients when it's not. So for most people, because they're living in the Meatrix, they can't even think about this being a viable solution to our energy problems when it is. You know, once you become plant-based and escape the Meatrix, you just say, we'll just get rid of the cows, It would be so much better. And then the World Bank Group said that livestock and their byproducts actually account for at least 32,564 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, or 51% of annual worldwide greenhouse gas emissions. 51% of all of our emissions are coming from livestock and their byproducts. I mean, when I learned that, it just blew my mind. And again, why isn't the mainstream media talking about that? It's because the meat and dairy industries have the media in their pocket. Again, I mean, people don't want to hear this, and so I'm hoping people who are hearing this are getting as fired up as I am when I talk about this. Yeah. So we now have these amazing plant-based meat alternatives on the market. We have Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat and all kinds of amazing plant-based foods that imitate, meat, but they're so much better for our health and for the environment. There's been so many new products that have come out since like 2019 or something. It's insane. And I love these foods because to me, they are perfect gateway plant-based foods. I grew up, my mom, she centered every meal around a piece of animal protein on my plate. It was either chicken or pork or meat, a hamburger or something like that. And then the vegetables were just like playing second fiddle to the main attraction, which was the meat. So if we can just make the transition into plant-based eating, substituting the animal protein on our plate with one of these plant-based meat alternatives, it's so seamless. You can use the same recipe that your mom made, that your favorite recipes, and just substitute, like I said, the animal protein with a plant-based meat alternative, and it's going to be so much better for the planet, and it'll be better for your health, and it'll be a win for the animals. They'll appreciate it too, right? So, for instance, compared to a beef burger, a Beyond Meat burger generates 90% fewer greenhouse gas emissions, requires 46% less energy, has 99% less impact on water scarcity, and has 93% less impact on land use. That is a huge win for the environment. And the Beyond Burger tastes great. Some people complain, it's a processed food. And it is true, it is processed. And, I advocate for a whole foods, plant-based lifestyle. And I encourage people to eat as many unprocessed foods as possible: whole fruits, vegetables, legumes, nuts, seeds, grains, all of that. But I still grill up one of these burgers every now and then. And, eating one salad doesn't make you healthy, and eating one steak doesn't ruin your health, So eating one of these plant-based meat alternatives, once, twice a month or whatever, it's not going to ruin your health. It'll be better for you than eating, the animal-based food, and it's so much better for the planet. So I think it could be used, these plant-based meat alternatives could be a great, way for people who are eating meat to segue into more plant-based eating, and and then gradually move in more into eating whole plant-based foods. And so the Anthropocene is the epoch that we're living in now. So that's the epoch where humans, unfortunately, are having the greatest impact on the environment and the climate. And so that's what Anthropocene means. But this Eat Lancet Commission came together. The Lancet is a British weekly peer-reviewed medical journal, highly regarded, highly esteemed medical journal. And so what they tried to do is they said, we've got these climate goals, and we're trying to create a sustainable future. And like I said earlier, scientists say, we can't reach our goals without also decarbonizing the food production system. So that's what they tried to tackle. They said, okay, how can we do that? How can we have sustainable food and healthy diets and meet our climate goals? And their report came out and it said 820 million people on the planet are food insecure. That's 10% of our global population are food insecure. They don't get enough food. And 2 billion people, I think they said, were nutritionally insecure. They're not getting the nutrients that they need from the foods that they're eating. So we have a real problem with within our food system that we need to address. And the other thing that shook me to my core is they said global food production threatens the stability of the Earth system. That blew my mind. I think if you ask most people, they would say, oh, the fossil fuel industry, right? They're destroying the planet, or it's all these cars that we're driving. No, it's the global food production. It's trying to feed 8 billion people animal-based centered diet, meat and dairy. As you have seen from the charts we've already looked at, that is the animal-based foods that are taking the lion's share of our resources. And so what they said, now I want to just come out front and say that the Lancet Commission, the Anthropocene Eat Lancet Commission, did not say we all have to become plant-based and vegan. No, they didn't say that, but they said we need to see a widespread adoption of a plant-based lifestyle if we're to avert the worst-case scenarios of climate change. All their recommendations for animal-based food start at 0 grams a day. Why would they start out at 0 grams a day if they didn't think that was healthy? I mean, their whole idea is to tell us, what a healthy diet would look like. But they know people probably aren't going to become 100% plant-based, right? So they said you could have chicken once a week. They set guidelines, red meat maybe once a week. You could have fish a couple times a week. So it's mainly a Mediterranean diet. Back when the Mediterranean diet was, super healthy. And, I think that you don't need those animal-based foods, but I think if they had come out and said we all need to be plant-based, I think people would have really freaked out. So, I hear a lot of people saying, okay, Stuart, I know that plant-based foods are more sustainable, but we can make animal-based foods more sustainable. We can grow them in a more efficient and more sustainable way, right? So I know that there are dairy farmers that are trying to capture the methane from their cows, and they're trying to convert it into biogas and have like a carbon neutral loop in their production of dairy, which is, very high tech, unproven to work, and especially isn't something that you could do at scale, around the earth. You just couldn't do that. And then there are some people who say, well, we can do rotational grazing of livestock. And that way, ruminant animals are helping store carbon into the earth. Have you heard about that, Mariquita?
No, I haven't heard about that.
Yeah, it's again, one of those myths. It's kind of like a plastic bag or buying local food. So they say that, these animals, if you rotate them through different pastures, that they actually can help the earth store more carbon. So I was listening to this podcast by these 3 guys, and their podcast is all about carbon. It's all about, the carbon crisis, decarbonizing our earth, basically. And so they were saying, farmers are a little resistant to this rotational grazing of livestock because they have to divide their pasture into 4 different parcels. So they need additional fencing. And then each pasture needs to have a water supply, so they have to bring water into it. So there's upfront costs. But then, they let the animals graze in one pasture and move them to the other. So they rotate them around. And so this is thought to make animal-based food from ruminant animals more sustainable. Well, the most that you could ever hope to sequester of ruminant animals' emissions, if you had the perfect ideal number of animals per acre, and you had like the perfect soil moisture content, everything at this ideal level, the most you could ever hope to reduce of their emissions would be about 22%. That's the most you could ever reduce their emissions. So, when you're trapped in the Meatrix, like these guys on this podcast were, they can't see the elephant in the room, or in this case, the cow in the room, because to them, it's a given. It has to be there. But when you escape the Meatrix, you just step back and you say, hey, we can reduce their emissions 100% by not having the cow. We don't need the cow, right? So, yeah, it blows my mind. So what this commission said is that we could decrease our greenhouse gas emissions in food production by 10% by year 2050. But if we increased our plant-based consumption with making this adjustment to a widespread plant-based diet, we could reduce the emissions from food by 80%. So rather than trying to reduce cows' emissions by 22%, I think we'd be better off trying to reduce emissions by 80%, right? So
Definitely.
I've given a lot of information today. We need to wrap up here pretty soon so I can answer some questions. But if people only remember one number from my presentation, I hope they'll walk away remembering 73%, because the Oxford University did a 5-year study and they analyzed over 38,000 farms in 119 countries. And they determined that in America, where the population eats 3 times more meat per capita than the global average, that we can lower our carbon footprint by 73% simply by giving up animal-based foods and adopting a plant-based lifestyle. There's no single other thing that we could do that could lower our personal carbon footprint that much. I mean, we could stop taking flights, we could drive an electric car, we could take shorter showers. There's a lot of things that we think we could do that would be, could make a difference, but there's nothing that compares to simply giving up animal-based foods and adopting a plant-based lifestyle. And people will say, well, Stuart, that's great, that's good for the earth, but what about me? If I give up eating animal-based foods, my health is gonna go down the toilet, right? So we'll just kind of go through. No, your health is actually going to be just fine. So the U.S. Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics says that a plant-based lifestyle contains all the nutrients that we need to be healthy at any stage of life. So this is a lifestyle that is not only better for the earth, it's saving all these resources. It's certainly beneficial to the animals, and it's actually beneficial to our health too. And then the National Institute of Health, I was really surprised, Meredith, when I ran across this memo from the National Institute of Health that they sent to all physicians, and they said physicians should consider recommending a plant-based diet to all their patients, especially those with high blood pressure, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, or obesity. And in their conclusion, they write, the future of healthcare will involve an evolution toward a paradigm where the prevention and treatment of disease is centered not on a pill or surgical procedure, but on another serving of fruits and vegetables. Now, guess when this memo came out that they sent to all doctors? You have any idea what year it would have been?
I don't know, 10 years, 20 years ago, 10 years ago?
10 years ago, 2013. Yeah, you're exactly right. I just now uncovered it when I was doing the research for my book. I don't think anyone, in the media has reported on this. And when I have to say that when I read this last part about replacing pills and surgical procedures with other servings of fruits and vegetables, I thought, I don't know. I was skeptical, I'll say. I was skeptical that would be done or that could be done, because in our society, people just, they want a quick fix. They want a pill, they want a surgery, they don't want to make a lifestyle change, and, they want a quick fix. And, that's what the pharmaceutical industry promotes is a quick and easy fix. You can just keep living your life the way you always have been and just take this pill. So I heard about this. I went to a Future of Food Summit last year, and I heard about this pilot program that they were doing in Washington, D.C., and it's called DC Greens. And this is an amazing program because they're doing exactly what the National Institute of Health said would be happening, this paradigm shift from, prescribing fruits and vegetables. So they have a produce prescription program, and this is for people who are Medicaid recipients who have chronic health conditions. And so the doctors are writing prescriptions for fresh fruits and vegetables. And you might think, why? I think it's up to $120 a month. And so you may be thinking, well, why is the government spending money in this way? Why is our tax dollars being used to buy fruits and vegetables for these patients? Well, they found out in this pilot program that for every dollar that they're spending on these produce prescriptions, we're saving $3 in healthcare costs. And that's just the beginning. This is just a pilot program. So that's the tip of the iceberg. So yeah, that National Institute of Health was right. Doctors will be prescribing fruits and vegetables rather than pills and surgical procedures, and it works. It brings people off their medications that they were taking for high blood pressure, diabetes. Um, so it's amazing. So that's the power of plants. And I think we should now, it's like 50 minutes. I think we should just move right on into some questions and answers. And I love this quote. We'll kind of end it here with Mark Twain. The lesser it is to justify a traditional custom, the harder it is to get rid of it. The tradition of eating meat in our country and in the world, has to come to an end. We just cannot, it's not sustainable. And I hope that everyone was here tonight saw the slides and can see that we cannot continue the tradition of eating meat. And the problem is that it's hard to get rid of something that's, you can't justify, and it's ubiquitous and it's everywhere. But, plant-based lifestyle it's never been easier now to adopt a plant-based lifestyle than it is today. It's so easy, and there's so many resources online. There's so many vegan cookbooks, vegan groups to connect with, so many products available in the groceries now. So it is a very powerful time, easy time to become plant-based. So I encourage everybody to escape the Meatrix, choose the red pill, and eat plants, feel great, and save the planet. So I don't know if we have any questions in the chat or anything. We have some time, or if you have any questions for Akita.
Yeah, I'm going to take the slides down, and let's see here. Yeah, that was very informative. It was, how do you handle? There was so much information. I'm going to have to go back and study it.
How do you handle?
Yeah, it's a lot. And wow, you've done your homework. I'm very impressed.
Thanks.
So, and if you're watching, please subscribe. Let me say that. And also I want to say that if you're liking this, that we did it .health, we're having a climate healer certification program. We're getting that going. So in the next, coming up soon, because we need to learn these facts, right? And take back. So we can have powerful conversations. So what about your family? Are they plant-based?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate that my family, we decided to do this, as a family, and we fully embraced it. I know for some people it's a gradual transition, and for us it was overnight, cold turkey. And I can share a little bit about my story. We first became plant-based, Mariquita, back in 1985 when I was 23.
Oh wow!
So it was the vegan wasteland back then in Kentucky, for sure. We didn't have Beyond Meat burgers or anything like that. We had to create our own vegan food. In fact, we couldn't even, there was no, internet at that time, really. So we actually, a group of people, we adopted this way of eating, and we had weekly potlucks every Friday night, and we started collecting recipes, and we actually published our own vegan cookbook back in 1986, a little spiral-bound notebook of all of our recipes, and I still have a copy of it. But unfortunately, I just started doing a lot of traveling, as you mentioned in the introduction, and it was easier to stay plant-based traveling internationally, but traveling in the United States in 1987 and 88, it was impossible to be vegan. You just couldn't do it and sustain yourself. You could only eat so many iceberg lettuce salads, So I reluctantly became vegetarian, and then like in 2008 became plant-based again, and it was a lot easier, and it's just getting easier and easier. So yeah, so my family's fully on board,
What a blessing, I know. Very fortunate.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. So I see that JJ's here watching with us. She's got a great channel, Vegan Knowledge. She's really spreading the word to her community. That's wonderful.
Sorry, JJ.
And then I don't know who this is, but they like the quote that you just put up. That was a great way to end that little slideshow. Yeah, and then Peter, he's the founder of We Did It .health.
Nice, Peter. Yeah, I know the National Institute of Health isn't perfect. they support animal testing and places around the world that they couldn't do here. So I know there's some blowback about the National Institute of Health, but I agree with you. I think when it comes to health, they are insulated from the pressures from the industry and from lobbyists. And so they're more often than not, they're getting the science right. So,
Yeah. And Peter also has another comment that President Carter's administration took measures.
yeah, yeah. I love Jimmy Carter. I love so many things that he's done in his life. And yeah, President Reagan came in and of course, reversed all the progress we had made because of the oil crisis at the time. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, so what would you say to someone that's really struggling and they've got a friend that now they're going out to dinner with their friend for the first time, and they're going to have to present that I eat plants, I don't eat animals, and they're kind of scared that they're scared the friend's going to make fun of them. What would you say to that person, Stuart? How would what would you
Wow.
recommend how to handle that?
Well, yeah. Well, I think when you're making plans with somebody who's an omnivore and that's eating animal-based foods, it would be good to discuss ahead of time where it is you're going to go to eat, and then you can check to see if there's something for you to eat on the menu. Even the hardcore steakhouse, has a baked potato and a salad. So, sometimes it's more important to have time together. And we learned through the pandemic, how important that is and how precious it is to have time together. So I think, trying to negotiate where you go and then trying to find a place that's mutually agreeable to both parties. And I think that it's important to just do your thing, and not make a big deal out of the fact that you're plant-based. And I think what happens, and I'll talk about this in my book, is that plant-based eaters, because they're uncomfortable with their own meat eating, go through, when they're in the presence of a plant-based eater, they have all kinds of cognitive dissonance that's happening, and they go through all these mental gymnastics to justify their eating pattern. And so a vegan and plant-based eater doesn't have to be obnoxious or militant about it. Just by being in our presence, some omnivores are going to have strong reactions because they, in their heart, they know better, but they don't do better. And that's where that comes from. So, I think just know that if that should happen, if someone gets very angry or upset or something, just know it's not you. It's their own feelings about how they're living their life, and you're just bringing an awareness to them that it's not necessary, that the animal-based foods that they are eating is that they're doing it by choice, but that is not necessary. And that makes people really uncomfortable. So I think, being aware of that, and, just trying to be discreet as much as you can about it. But I wouldn't take an omnivore to a vegan restaurant without, making sure that they knew that's what was happening. So, if you pick a vegan restaurant and you're taking, you're meeting up with an omnivore, make sure that they know that. Otherwise, it could be really problematic. Some people get really, really angry about that. So I don't know if that answered your question. It's kind of a long way of getting around.
No, I think that it's right. I mean, we have to be gentle. We don't want to turn someone off, and we can easily turn them off. Just our presence, like you were saying, can make somebody very angry and very defensive.
Yeah, and it's really a lot of times it's nothing that we've done. It's just because we're going against what society says is the norm, and that makes some people uncomfortable. So, yeah, I think we have a problem in the plant-based movement with being judgy, honestly, and I have done I've done it myself with people judging them for their food choices. But, I spent the first 23 years of my life eating meat. So I can't point my finger at anybody that's still there doing it. And I say that in my book. I'm not about blaming and shaming people, because I think that just is not an effective way to bring about change. So, I think we just lead by example. But, we can't just keep waiting for the light bulb to go off, which is why I wrote my book. Time is of the essence. It's really critical right now that we make changes fast to avert these worst case scenarios of climate change. And, it's time. So I do believe that, people need to kind of get there in their own time, but we kind of need to speed up the timeline. We need to convert a lot more people to thinking about this as an option. And, I want to go back. Well, you don't have the slides, but, I had a slide in there that said, the question was, do I have to become 100% plant-based, And no, you don't have to become 100% plant-based. Any reduction you can make in eating animal-based foods, the better it'll be for your health and for the planet. And I think we turn a lot of people off by saying that it has to be 100%. It's 100% for me, but still, I'm not perfect. I'm sure there are things that I did today that could be considered non-vegan. I try my best, and I think we all should just try to do the best we can where we are with what we have at the time. And, we would win more people over if we were less judgy about, what people were eating. So.
Right, exactly. You're right. And that's what we want to do at We Did It Health. We want to be able to show people how to communicate effectively without judging, without shaming. We can't blame. We have to remember that most of us, we're not always vegan or plant-based. And I just want to show, Peter's always talking about the new pharmacy, right? And I love that part of your presentation. That gave me so much hope, to hear that the pilot.
Yeah, that's great. I would love to do that, and I would love to see that program, replicated all over the U.S., but particularly in my home state of Kentucky. My state's a beautiful state with amazing, wonderful people, but one of the least healthiest states in our nation. So a pilot program for produce prescriptions would be amazing. It would transform so many lives in our state. So I would really love to talk to anybody who would have the power to help, bring that to Kentucky. So yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah. Let me show one more comment. And I think it says BJ, and I'm thinking that's BJ from Climate Healers. Once our eyes are open, we can't pretend they are closed. So yeah, this is a time to take action, like Stuart's saying. We've got to do something. We've got to be able to use our voices. That means work on ourselves, because if we're scared and shy, and I used to be very shy, right? That's not going to help. That's not going to help the earth. For me to I really got to step into my power.
Yeah, I've been doing this for so many years. So why did I write my book? Now it's because it's like I said, it's a critical time. We need all the resources out there that we can get. My book will reach some people that another book can't. So. But I was really motivated by vegan activists who said, we all have a part to play in this. And, what can you do? If you're an artist, do vegan art. If you're a writer, write something vegan. So, and I really took his words to heart. And so that's why I did my book, because I wanted to do my part. And it takes a village. It takes all of us. And so.
Yeah, it does, right? And Dr. Klopper's reading your book. So. It's booming. So everybody get a copy of Stuart's book. I guess we should wrap this up. So we can. But yeah. So can you show us the book again? Behind, I see it behind you. So Escape the Meatrix.
Yeah.
So and tell us. And so you're on. We can get this on Amazon.
Yes, it's available on Amazon. I have a paperback, hardback, and ebook. And you can find me at my website, stuartwaldner.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. Please check out my book. It's a great reference book. It's a science-based book. It has over 400 citations in it, and it's full of science. And all those charts I was showing earlier, they're in my book. So I think it's a great book to introduce people to this way of eating. I try to cover all the reasons why it is so important. So I don't just focus on the environment like I did in tonight's presentation. I encompass, animal welfare. I have a large chapter on health too, and I have anecdotes, spread through the book of my personal life. So, hope people will check it out. And let's eat plants.
Definitely.
Let's go.
Wonderful. All right. So this has been so much fun. Everybody hit subscribe, because we'll definitely have Stuart back on again. We were already talking about his next presentation. So thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Peter, and BJ and JJ. We got all these. And whoever else is watching on the replay, make sure you get the book. And thank you so much, Stuart. This has been very amazing.
Thank you, Marikita. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, all right. Namaste vegan, everybody. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.